All right, welcome everyone. In this explainer, we're going to do a deep dive into the fundamentals of malocclusion. We'll be focusing specifically on angles classifications, the system that really is the bedrock of how we diagnose in orthodontics. So, here's what we've got on the agenda. We're going to start with some basic definitions, then walk through each of angles classes one by one. After that, we'll get into the why and how, the etiology and diagnosis, and wrap up with a look at some modern treatment approaches. Okay, first things first. Let's establish our clinical baseline. What do we actually mean when we talk about occlusion in its ideal form? So, by the book, occlusion is this perfect biological and functional coordination, how the maxillary and mandibular teeth are supposed to come together and function. But let's be real, as clinicians, we all know this textbook ideal is something you rarely, if ever, see in practice without some kind of orthodontic intervention. Now, this is what I find really striking. A staggering 92% of malocclusion cases are idiopathic. That means, for the vast majority, we don't have a single known cause. And this is exactly why having a clear, consistent classification system is so incredibly vital for our diagnosis and treatment planning. And that need for a system brings us, of course, to the man himself, Dr. Edward Hartley Angle. His classification system was, well, brilliant in its simplicity. By using the first molars as a consistent reference point, he created a framework that's still the absolute cornerstone of orthodontics today. All right, let's jump into section 2 and our first classification, angles class 1 or Malocclusion. This is the one you're going to see most often in the chair, making up about 60% of all malocclusion cases. So what's the key diagnostic landmark? It's really specific. You're looking for the mesial-buccal cusp of the maxillary first molar to occlude right with the buccal grooves of the mandibular first molar. It's important to remember, though, that even with this correct molar relationship, you can still have other issues going on, like crowding or spacing. And here's a fantastic clinical example. Look at that. It's a textbook class 1 molar relationship. But you can also clearly see that it exists alongside some pretty significant anterior crowding and that labially positioned canine. Now, it doesn't just stop there. Even within class 1, we have subtypes. The Dewey and Anderson modifications are super helpful because they allow us to describe the specific variations in the anterior and posterior, which gives us a much more nuanced and useful diagnosis. Okay, let's move on to our next section, angles class 2, also known as distocclusion. This category accounts for roughly 32% of cases, and it's defined by a retrognathic mandible. In other words, the lower jaw is positioned posterior to the maxilla. So, the key feature here, the thing to look for in a class 2, is that the mesial-buccal cusp of the upper first molar occludes mesial, or ahead of, the buccal groove of the lower first molar. This tells you that the entire mandibular arch is shifted distally. This photo is a perfect illustration of that relationship. You can see it right there. The mesial-buccal cusp of that maxillary molar is clearly anterior to the buccal groove of the mandibular molar. Classic class 2. Okay, this is absolutely crucial. Class 2 isn't just one thing. It's split into two very distinct divisions, and it all comes down to what the anterior teeth are doing. In Division 1, you've got those protruded maxillary incisors, that excessive overjet and often poor lip seal. Division 2, on the other hand, is totally different. You'll see retroclined centrals, sometimes overlapped by the laterals, and a really deep, often impinging overbite. All right, let's move on to our final classification, angles class 3, or mesio-occlusion. And as you'd probably guess, the relationship is now reversed. Here, the mandible is prognathic, meaning it's positioned anteriorly relative to the maxilla. So for class 3, the diagnostic key is that the mesial-buccal cusp of the upper first molar now occludes distal, or behind, the buccal groove of the lower first molar. This skeletal pattern is what often gives us that anterior crossbite and that characteristic concave facial profile. And this diagram really illustrates that shift perfectly. Those red lines help emphasize exactly how the upper molar's mesial-buccal cusp is sitting distal to the lower molar's buccal groove. Just like the other classes, Class 3 is also subtyped to give us more detail. And this is clinically so important because it helps us differentiate a true skeletal Class 3 from what we call a pseudo-Class 3, where the anterior crossbite is really just due to some dental tipping, not a true jaw discrepancy. Okay, so we've defined the classifications. Now let's dig into the why and the how. What's the etiology behind these conditions, and what are the diagnostic tools we use to identify them? You know, the genetic component of malocclusion is just fascinating, and there's no better example than the Habsburg dynasty. Their characteristic Habsburg jaw is probably the most famous historical example of hereditary mandibular prognathism. It's a powerful reminder of the strong genetic predispositions we see every day in our patients. So when it comes to diagnosis, we have a whole toolkit. It's a combination of our clinical evaluation and, of course, precise imaging. Now, panoramic and CBCT scans give us great, broad anatomical views, but the cephalometric radiograph, that's still the gold standard for really quantifying the specific skeletal relationships that define these malocclusions. All right, let's wrap up by looking at some of the key therapeutic interventions we have available to manage these conditions. Appliances like the Rapid Palatal Expander, or RPE, are a great example. They're most effective when a patient is still growing. Why? Because we can leverage that natural growth to achieve true skeletal expansion. We're literally separating the mid-palatal suture before it fuses. This is an absolutely crucial intervention for a lot of our Class 1 and Class 3 cases that have those transverse discrepancies. And that brings us to the choice between two of our main treatment modalities. This slide really lays out the key considerations. On one hand, you have fixed appliances, braces, which give us maximum control for really complex tooth movements. On the other hand, clear aligners offer this great aesthetic removable option, but their success is almost entirely dependent on high patient compliance. So that brings our explainer to a close. And I want to leave you with a question to think about for the future. As we see incredible advances in technology, things like AI-driven diagnostics and new biomaterials, what do you think will be the next great leap forward in how we achieve ideal occlusion? What's going to redefine our approach?